StrayAllDay.com.
Now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline, show up day after day to do the work, the confidence, put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. Dre, what is that? That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that's called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, today we are talking about why to raise your floor. Before we get into this, I'll remind you of two things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation message is guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day. All you got to do is be a member of my text community to receive those messages. And to do that, just send me a text to this number, 305-384-6894. And once we start sending that message out again, you'll be getting it straight to your phone. Our bot will let you know that it's on the way, and then those text messages will be coming straight from me. You can even respond to them and engage with me through text. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. If you are a high level performer, looking for people who are in the top 2%, we are not looking for everybody. We can't serve everybody. I can't save everybody. I'm not Jesus Christ. I can save only the people who are top 2% performers. Actually, not even save you. What I'm going to do is help you who are in the top 2% get to that top 1%. And those who are in the top 1% get to the top half of 1%. I'm looking for high performers who want to keep performing at a high level. And those of you who are aiming to be high performers and you're ready to get there right now, those are the people who I'm talking to. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Link is down below in the description. With that out the way, let's get into the topic here today, which is why to raise your floor. Now, this subject, I actually got to give credit to two people on this, because I was talking to my guy, Chaz, who is an entrepreneur who I know just from my travels in the entrepreneurship world. I was speaking to him because actually I was speaking to one of his groups that he has, one of his business groups. And at the end of the meeting, he said that he was having a conversation with another guy, the second person I'm going to credit. This is a guy by the name of Benjamin Hardy. He wrote a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X, which is a great book that all of you should read. Anytime you hear me mention a book on this show, you should go get it. And in that book, which is written by Ben Hardy, and Chaz was recalling something he heard from Ben Hardy, the author. I have read the book. I've actually, as of this recording, I'm in the process of reading it again. I've read the book probably 4 times. This is my 5th reading of the book. And he mentioned this concept of raising the floor. And when he said it, it made me think about, you know what, raising the floor is a great idea. And today, again, credit to Ben and Chaz, but I'm going to give you my take on the concept of raising the floor, why it matters, what it means, and how you can do it. That's what we're going to talk about here today. Again, from my vantage point, and explain to you how you can start using this concept. Point number 1. Topic, once again, is why to raise your floor. Number 1, first of all, let's get clear on what a floor is. What does that even mean, to raise the floor? The floor is your standards and commitments. And if you think about this, once I contextualize what I mean by this, it'll make perfect sense why we call it the floor. Because the floor is your baseline. If you're inside of a building right now, there's a floor underneath your feet. I'm assuming everyone who's here, everyone not here, but everyone who's listening to me, there is some type of surface beneath your feet right now, unless you happen to be anywhere you are. Even if you're not actually touching it, it's there. If you're sitting in a chair and it's high enough that your feet are dangling, there is a surface. If you get off the chair, your feet are going to land on the ground. If you're on the swings right now at the playground and you get off the swing, your feet are going to land on the ground. If you're in a car, your foot is on the floor of the car. If you're in a building, your foot is on the floor. If you're standing outside, your feet are on the concrete, on the pavement. That's the floor. That is the bottom line. Those are your standards and commitments. And what I mean by the floor is you can't go lower than the floor. All right. You can't go any further down than the floor. The floor exists there to keep you. All right. That's as low as you can go, is right to the ground. All right. If you're on the 10th story of a building and you jump down, the furthest down you can go is to the ground. You can't go any deeper than that. So that's the floor. All right. Those are your standards, your baseline. That's the minimum accepted level of achievement and performance. That is what we mean when we say the floor. And the conversation that I've had with many business owners, especially those who have been in business for many years, is about working with. Many of them talk about this, especially those of you who are in client-based businesses where there's a deliverable outside of the transaction. I mean, you're continually working with these people in addition to the one exchange of money, or maybe periodical exchange of money, but there's a lot of work that goes on in between money exchanges. It's about, again, especially client-based businesses, working with fewer customers, fewer clients, when those clients could be people, they could be companies, and maybe focusing on passing off some of your business and passing off maybe some of the less valuable business to other aspects of your business, or dropping those people completely so that you can focus more on the highest level individuals. In other words, what it's about is, to put this in simple terms, is applying the 80-20 principle to your business. Most business people, when they understand the 80-20 principle, understand that they want and need to apply it to themselves and what they're doing at work. Almost everybody agrees with it. And how they're dealing with their clients and how they're running their business, and also how you are bringing in new people to your business, because you want to bring in more people who are in that 20% that produce 80% of the results, rather than more people in the 80% who are only producing 20% of the results. You want to get away from serving so many of them and get focused on serving a few of the highest level individuals. Again, anyone who's been in business for a while, especially client-based businesses, they all generally accept this idea. Now, the starting point for doing this is what we're talking about here in point number one. The starting point is deciding what your floor will be. That's the starting point. What is the minimum level of person or company or client or prospect that you want to deal with? That's the question you must answer. So let me give you an example of this, so those of you can visualize this. Even if you don't run a client-based business, you can understand this. If you've been to Las Vegas or any casino, but Las Vegas is the best example because they have the most casinos and the biggest ones. When you go to the gambling floor and walk around, even if you're not gambling, next time you're in a Vegas casino, walk around and you'll notice this. There are games that tell you exactly what the floor is. So for example, if you walk by the roulette wheels, there are roulette wheels where you can bet as little as $5. It tells you right there on the sign. It says minimum bet $5. That's the lowest amount you can bet. If you want to gamble here, you have to put down at least $5 on the bet. There are other roulette wheels that say the minimum bet is $50. You cannot bet less than $50. You can bet more than 50, but you can't bet less than 50. And then there's also tables where the minimum is $100. There's tables where the minimum is $1,000. And they're doing the same thing in other rooms. So the poker room or other blackjack tables, they have minimum tables. They have minimums at every table. Minimum here, you can bet $10 a hand. There's other tables where the minimum you bet is $100 a hand. Then they have the high rollers room. They literally call it the high roller room. I don't know if that's the exact, I know that's what people call it colloquially. I don't know if that's what they put on the sign. I believe they do. Last time I was in Vegas, I think that's what they call it, the high rollers room. I'm not a big gambler, so I've never gambled in the high rollers room, but I've seen it. And in there, the minimum hand could be a whole lot more. It could be 5,000, it could be 10,000, depending on who's in the room. And what they're telling you is this is the floor. The floor is every time you play a game here, the minimum that you have to put down is this amount of money. It's the same thing you want to do in your business, isn't it? Those of you who have client-based businesses and you want to have more clients who are spending at least $1,000 and less clients who are spending only $100, what you would need to do is set a minimum for the table, metaphorically speaking, that if you want to come sit at this table, i.e. be a part of your business, be one of your clients, you got to put down a minimum of $1,000. Anything less than that, I'm not for you. Like, you could buy one of my courses, you could get into one of my, maybe my group access programs, or you could sign up for my app, but I cannot be your direct coach or trainer or consultant or physical therapist if you're not putting down at least $1,000. That is setting a minimum floor. That's what it means. And any business person who I've had a conversation with, and many of you who are listening to this, I have talked to you. Those of you who are in business and this concept has crossed your mind, or maybe this is the first time you ever thought about it, all of you get this. All of you understand what I'm saying. Even if you're not in business, you understand what I'm saying. But this is not as easy as it sounds. But I'm not finished. I'm still on point number one. All right, this is all about setting the floor and telling yourself and the world what eligibility requirements there are in order for you to get in. Any of you who has a job or has ever had a job, there is a minimum eligibility requirement. You saw that in the job listing when you applied for it in the first place. It said, if you want to be if you want this position, here are the minimums that you have to have. You have to have this. When I hire an assistant, I'll say something like, you need to be proficient using things like Gmail and Google Docs and CRM software, and you have to know how to work a schedule. You got to be able to reply to emails. You had to be fluent and damn near native when it comes to speaking English. You got to be really good at writing in English, and don't be making any verbal mistakes when you're writing in English. And because sometimes I hire people from outside the USA, this is the floor. What I'm doing is setting the floor. In some businesses, they'll say you need to have a minimum of 4 years experience doing ABC if you want this job. What are they doing? Setting the floor. If you have 3 years, you can't get the job. You got no years, you can't have this job. This is not the job for you. It is setting the minimum. This is the same thing you need to do when it comes to setting standards and rules for yourself. Everybody listening to this can do this. Does not matter what you do for a living. You could not even have a job and you can start doing this. What are the minimum standards and rules you're setting for yourself right now? If you haven't had any before, never thought about it, I'm telling you now, so now start doing it. What are the minimum acceptable levels of performance and achievement in each specific area of your life? I gave you an example of this. I'll give you an example of. I'll reiterate. I heard Jordan Belfort. He's the guy that the movie The Wolf of Wall Street was made about. He's a real person, and that was based on his real life. Of course, they hyped it up to make it into a movie. But I heard him speaking once in Miami. He was speaking, just telling his story, and then he was, of course, selling something on the back end, all part of the game. And I remember him saying that his minimum, at least at the time that he was talking, he said his minimum expectation for income every year is $20 million. He said if I get to October and I've only made $15 million for the year, it's like hard for me to go to sleep because I have a minimum standard for myself that I've set. He set a floor for himself of $20 million. What is the floor for you? I'm not saying it has to be based on money. It can be based on any aspect of your life that you care about. It could be your fitness. It could be your relationships. It could be how many emails you send every day. It could be how many doors you're knocking on. It could be how much money you make. It could be how many friends you have. It could be how many people you approach and talk to about your business every day. What is it? What are the minimum levels that are bottom line acceptable for you in your business and in your life? If you want to raise your performance in any aspect of life, the first thing you must do is raise the floor before you worry about raising the ceiling. See, most people focus on raising the ceiling because the ceiling is the goal. All right, so let's say you had a goal of you want to make $100,000 a year. All right, and then you did it. Then you may say, okay, well, my goal this year, since I made $100,000 last year, my goal this year is I want to make $250,000 or I want to make $1 million. All right, that's raising the ceiling. That's raising the goal, the top level where you want to get to. Instead, you should raise the floor and say, okay, now that I made $100,000, making anything less than $100,000 a year is unacceptable. So now the new floor is $100,000. That's your minimum. Or you could say, well, no, my new floor is $150,000. So if I'm at less than $150,000, I'm panicking because I can't do that. That's impossible. Can't do it. All right, that's a form of raising the floor. It's the same thing when it comes to, again, your clients. If you say, okay, I got 10 clients who pay me $100 each, and I got 3 clients who pay me $1,000. I'm raising the floor to every client has to pay at least $1,000. Anybody paying me less than $1,000, I'm getting rid of those clients. I'll pass them off to other people. And now anybody who wants to work with me had to pay me at least $1,000. So if you do the math on that, if you got 10 clients paying you $100, you made $1,000 total. That's $100 times 10. If you have 3 clients paying you $1,000 each, that's $3,000 total, and you only had 3 people to serve. So which one is making you more money? The 3 who are paying you $1,000 a piece, or the 10 who are paying you $100 a piece? Of course, it's the 3. That's just simple math. So if you cut off the 10 who are paying you $100 a piece, yes, you just let go of $1,000, but not only did you free up some of your resources and time, but also now you're only working with people who pay you at least $1,000. So you only got to replace those 10 with 1, and you already got your money back. So it's a pretty simple concept. Again, very simple concept. It's not so easy to execute on, and I'm going to explain to you why as we go further in these points. Again, and so the first point here is think about raising the floor rather than raising the ceiling or raising the roof. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is why to raise your floor. Number 2, let's talk a little bit more about why you want to raise your floor. First thing we did was just explain what the floor is. So now that you understand it, let's talk about the why. The higher your floor, the higher your performance. The higher your floor, the higher your performance. Your standards, because the floor is your standards. Your standards are a guaranteed minimum for what you will deliver. I have a friend who's a member in Work on Your Game University. She has a food business. And in her food business, she basically works as a vendor. She does events and things like that. And one of the things that happens in that business when you work as a vendor in the food service industry is sometimes you sign contracts for guaranteed minimums. So in other words, let's say you had a food truck, for example, and you're going to bring your food truck to some venue, and you have an agreement with whoever runs the venue that you can bring your truck there, but you sign a contract with them for a guaranteed minimum. You tell them, look, we need to sell at least $1,000 worth of product at your event if we're going to park our truck here for 3 hours. And if we don't sell at least $1,000, you have to pay us the difference between what we did make and that $1,000. Let's say I got a food truck and I sign a contract with, let's see, who would have an event here in Miami. Let's say there's the Art Basel event and they say, bring your food truck over here, Dre, the Work on Your Game food truck. And I bring my food truck and I say, okay, well, if I'm going to bring my truck here for 2 hours, we got to make at least $1,000 in sales. And I'll show them the receipts. If we make only $850, Art Basel event venue people, y'all owe us $150 because you had to pay us the difference to make us whole to $1,000. You got to get us up to that $1,000 minimum. Now, if we make $1,500, then we're all good. Y'all don't owe us anything. We don't owe you anything. But if we don't make at least $1,000, you got to pay us the difference. The point is, we're setting the standard. That's what it's about. I'm just using that as an example. So your standards are a guaranteed minimum of what you will get and or what you will deliver. I remember doing a business deal with a company about 8 or 9 years ago, and we had an exact deal just like what I'm explaining to you here. They were going to do some marketing and advertising for me. I showed them what I was already doing, and they said, hey, we can do better than what you're doing, and if we don't, then we will give you the difference in cash of what we didn't do. And when the first round of us doing things, they had to give me the difference in cash because they didn't do as well as maybe they thought they would do. This is an example of setting the floor. When you raise your floor level, you are raising the minimum level of result that you will produce and accept. Any of you who's in the sports world, I know I have a lot of coaches, athletes, and former athletes who listen to the show. When you went from playing in high school to playing in college to playing pro, any of you who has ascended in those levels, did the floor go up? Of course it did. There's a minimum level of skill you got to have to play high school basketball. There's another level you got to be at to play college ball, and there's another level to play pro. The floor raises at each level, and not everybody is able to keep up with the raising of the floor. This is why some players play in high school and their careers end there. Some players make it to college, they don't go any further. Some players get to the pros, and maybe they can go to a certain level of pro, but they can't get to the highest level because the floor is a little bit too high, or they run out of time, one or the other. The whole point is there's a floor. At every level of performance, there is a floor and a minimum that you have to have. Remember, I was listening to, I believe it was Tim Ferriss, who's a well-known author, podcaster, investor guy. And I believe it was Tim that said this. He was talking about podcasting and how several years ago, probably about almost 10 years ago, he decided that in terms of what he wanted to focus on creatively, he was going to quadruple down on the podcast because the podcast was doing well and his fans liked it and he enjoyed it. So he just quadrupled down on doing the best podcast he could possibly do. And Tim is a very popular podcaster, one of the best in terms of just raw numbers and one of the best ever. And one of the things that I heard him say, this is like less than a year ago, he was talking to someone and he said, these days, if you want to compete in that space of being a podcaster, like the type of stuff that he does, and you want to be one of the top podcasters in terms of downloads and visibility and notoriety, you have to basically produce a TV show. Your podcast has to be TV show level quality and production, meaning you got to have a set, you got to have the lighting, you need a whole production team, you need professional editors, you got to have a whole professional setup in order, if you want to make your podcast your main thing that is drawing everybody into you in the world, you really want to compete, that's where you have to be these days. And he said this like less than a year ago. He might have probably 2023 when he said this. And whether you agree with that or not is immaterial. The point is, he was explaining what he believed the floor to be if you want to compete in that space. That's what it's about. That's the floor if you want to compete in that space. I talked about this when it comes to a sport like basketball, for example, that there is a floor of talent that you have to be at or above if you want to compete to play at the collegiate level or the professional level. All right, no matter how hard you work, how much you believe in yourself, how much time you spend practicing and working on your game, if you do not meet the floor level requirements physically or talent-wise, you will not play at the collegiate or the professional level. You can't hard work your way past that if you lack the talent or you lack the measurables. In basketball, for example, you pretty much need to be tall. If you're under 6 feet tall, you have to be amazing to get a chance at the collegiate or professional level. If you're over 6 feet tall, you don't have to be that great, depending on how much over 6 feet. If you're 7 feet tall, you can be a complete fucking bum and you will get a chance in basketball. Any basketball coaches or players with enough experience listening to me know exactly what I'm talking about. And players who are listening to this who know me, and we've seen some of the same players, we've seen some fucking bums. I'll give you an example. Not going to say the guy's name, but actually, I don't know if I even remember his name. First exposure camp, pro basketball exposure camp I went to. It was in Orlando, Florida in 2005. And at exposure camps, basically a bunch of players who want to play pro all come together and we all basically play basketball for a couple of days, try to prove that we're good enough to play pro. Now, me and one of my college teammates, we were on the same team at this exposure camp by luck of the draw. They didn't do that on purpose. And we had a teammate there. He was about 7 feet tall. This guy was 7 feet tall at the camp. And again, we got randomly put on different teams with different people who we never even met and didn't know. And this guy was about 7 feet tall, and he was a fucking bum. He was a bum. In terms of basketball playing ability, this guy was not good. He didn't really have any skill. Skill meaning practiced ability. I can tell when I look at a basketball player how much time they spend practicing and actually developing skill on the court, like actually practicing their skills by themselves. I can watch a player on a basketball court for 15 seconds and know, does he practice or does he not? All right, I can tell this is a guy who just rolls out on the court and just plays just because he was tall. He was 7 feet tall. And when you're 7 feet tall in basketball, you're always going to get an opportunity, even if you're a fucking bum. This guy was a bum, and he got opportunities just because he was tall. If I was 7 feet tall, I probably would have played in the NBA. I will say that with work ethic that I had and the discipline that I had, and I actually had some skill. If I was 7 feet tall, I easily would have played overseas for 15 years with not even trying. I wouldn't even have to go to an exposure camp. They would have been calling me, and I probably would have played in the NBA. This guy was a fucking bum, and he had no talent. Actually, let me back up. He had one talent. His talent was that he was 7 feet tall. In basketball, height is a talent, and in other sports that might not matter, but in basketball, height is a talent. So 7 feet tall is a big talent in basketball. It's the reason why he was there, and is the reason why he ended up signing contracts to play pro basketball. I don't know how long he played, probably not that long because he didn't really have a lot of game, and he didn't appear to really care about basketball. He appeared to be, and this happens, I notice this a lot with guys who are that tall, like 6'10" and up in basketball. Any of you who's in the basketball world, you probably notice this as well, that a lot of guys who are 6'10" and up, often you will find that you can tell just by the way they carry themselves. They don't really like basketball that much, but they play because their entire lives, everywhere they go, people are like, oh, do you play basketball? You got to play basketball. You're so tall, you got to play basketball. And because they're getting opportunities to play because they're tall, all right, whether they like the game or not. And I've run into enough of these guys to know that this is a common thing. I would say about at least half of players you see who are 6'10" or taller playing basketball might not even like basketball. They're playing because they can, and people are offering it to them. So anyway, this guy was a bum. But because of his physical abilities, he got opportunity. He met the floor. The floor was a basketball team of need tall guys. All right. And listen, if I was putting the team together, I might pick him up just so we got somebody that size just to take up space. Just take up space. Or just stand there and put your arms up. Or don't even breathe. Or just stand there and get out the way when we get the ball. Otherwise, just take up some space on the court. It's useful. All right. The point is, when the floor is set, as long as you're above it, you may get an opportunity. If you're below it, you will never get a shot. All right, so raising the floor means, so let's take it back to you now. It means demanding more of yourself and living up to those demands even when you don't feel like it. This is also known as the third day. Setting demands on yourself and living up to those demands even when you don't feel like living up to the demands. All right, what is the floor for you? What is the minimum acceptable thing for you? Or are you making sure that you're living up to it all the time? I heard Dan Kennedy say that in his heyday, when he was in his prime doing business, he always made sure that even if he was spending a whole day doing some type of deliverable, like let's say he was doing a live event, he spent the whole day speaking at his event. He always made sure he did at least one thing to set himself up for future business success. In other words, let me send at least one email to somebody who might be my customer tomorrow. Let me send out at least one packet to somebody who might be a client next month. Let me reply to at least one message for somebody who might become one of my customers 2 years from now. He always wanted to do at least one thing every day to make sure he was setting the table for future business success, regardless of how much success he had that day itself. That is an example of setting a floor. So a floor doesn't have to be this big, complex thing. It can be something as simple as that. This is the floor that I'm setting. I heard a basketball player say once, every time he was on the court practicing, he always made sure that the last shot he took before he left the gym, that shot had to go in. So if it was a layup, it was a three-pointer, he wouldn't leave the gym on a missed shot. The last shot he took had to go in the basket. So he was programming his subconscious mind, I guess in a way he was saying, he didn't say this, but programming his mind to see him making a shot, and that would be his last memory for the next time he got on the court. That's an example of setting the floor. So it can be something very simple, or it can be things that are very complex or somewhere in between. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is why to raise your floor. Number 3, the higher your floor, the less things you tolerate or accept. This is a very important one. It's a very important concept. I remember this guy named Matthew reminded me of this a couple of years ago, probably about 2021. He and I had met. We were inside the coaching program of this entrepreneur coach by the name of Alex Sharfin. And Alex has said this once in the program, and I didn't remember him saying it, but Matthew reminded me that Alex had said it. He said that a $1 million business owner does not tolerate the same things that a $100,000 business owner tolerates. And to take that further, the $10 million business owner does not tolerate the same things that the $1 million business owner tolerates. Point being, moving up in levels, folks, is not just about how much better you get at doing your stuff. That's part of it, but that's not all it's about. It's also about what you no longer allow, tolerate, or accept. In other words, if you want to move from the level you're at now to the level you want to be at next week, next year, or next month, you have to eliminate some things as well as add some things on. What are you willing to eliminate or no longer tolerate or accept if you want to move up? See, the person who is accepting $1,000 clients only no longer tolerates or accepts $100 clients. That's a form of eliminate. What are you getting rid of? What are you no longer tolerating or accepting? So it's about raising the floor, not just raising the ceiling. You follow what I'm saying here? And sometimes raising the floor is more effective than raising the ceiling. Because sometimes you might not be able to reach what's at the ceiling, but you always control the floor. Everyone who's listening to this controls the floor. You may not always control the ceiling. So if you set a goal of I want to make at least $1 million, maybe you will, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll come up short at 950,000. But if you say anything less than $200,000 is unacceptable, you can set that floor. All right. I think sometimes it's easier, if we really think about it, it's easier to set a floor, which is a minimum standard, which you control, than it is to set a ceiling, because sometimes the ceiling is something above anything you've ever done before, and it's not always completely in your control. So anyone who is consistently performing at a higher level than you, consider this, they simply have bottom line standards, i.e. floors, that are higher than your floors. So if you just raise your floor, then you're good. Right? Anything less than this is not acceptable. I can't do anything less. I got to do at least this. Anything less than that is not okay for me. All right, you can set that standard for yourself. Anybody can do that at any time. Let's recap today's class, which is why to raise your floor. Again, shout out to my guy Chaz and also Ben Hardy, the author, who he reminded me of what Ben Hardy wrote. So, and that led me to fleshing this out in my own way. This does not come from Ben, this came from me. Number one, the floor are your standards and commitments. These are your baselines, the minimum accepted level of achievement and performance. What are these for you? Many entrepreneurs I know want to execute on that 80-20 principle. The challenge is letting go at 80 and grasping onto the 20, even at the risk of throwing away a bunch of the 80 that now is no longer relevant to you, and living in what we call the void between the space of letting go of the 80 and picking up more of the 20. We talked about this in episode 2733. Number two, why to do this? The higher your floor, the higher your performance. Because again, you're raising your standards. We talked about standards a lot here on the show. The more you raise your standards, the higher your level of performance. Simple as that. Your standards are your baseline level of performance. The best performers out there just have higher standards than everybody else. And point number three, the higher your floor, the less things you tolerate and accept. $100,000 person accepts things that the $1 million person does not accept. And the $1 million person accepts things that the $10 million person does not accept, and so forth and so on. You want to be a higher level player at anything that you do. First thing you need to do is check the standards that you are holding yourself accountable to, or if you have any at all. And the higher those standards, the higher your floor, the higher your level of performance, because again, nothing less is acceptable. So there's no way that anything less can be accepted because it's not acceptable. That's how it works. But all that said, text me, see you in my community. Numbers down below in the description. Also, if you're a person with whom this message resonates and you're ready to raise your standards and raise your levels and raise your level of performance consistently and make anything less than that unacceptable, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You're the exact type of person who we serve best. Workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all